everyone. I'm Rachel. I am the engineering mentor for our part-time remote immersive program. If that is something you're interested in, I would love to hear from you in a Slack. So just DM me any questions you have about that. I was a Central Time remote immersive graduate from the program, and I was a fellow for the West Coast remote immersive. So I've kind of been all throughout the Codesmith ecosystem at this point. But yeah, I sort of teach some of the core lectures for the part-time remote immersive. That's my day-to-day. But today I will be hosting the panel. So I'm going to let our lovely panelists do their introductions as well. We're going to do name, where you are right now, your company and role, and how long you've been there, what cohort you were in, and then what you were doing before Codesmith, which, by the way, I didn't say any of that, but I live in LA now, and I am from Rochester, New York. So I will pass it off to Justin, and then we'll do Kelvin and then Jimmy.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Rachel. My name's Justin. I'm based out of Los Angeles. I'm working at Railbird Technologies right now, and I've been there for about a year. I was in West Coast Remote Immersive 52, and then I was studying mechanical engineering before Codesmith and worked a little bit at my friend's startup. Yeah. Kelvin?
All right. Hi, everybody. So my name is Kelvin. I am in Phoenix now. I moved out here actually to take the job that I have, which is with American Express. I've been here for about 10 months now. I graduated from C-Tree 13, so that would be Central Time Remote Immersive. And then what I was doing before this, I was teaching. So I was an ESL teacher, which is English as a second language. And yeah, I guess then we'll move on to Jimmy, right?
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name is Jimmy. I'm currently in Frisco, Texas, more so the Dallas-Fort Worth area, so the North Texas area. And I am a software engineer at JPMorgan for about 2 months now. And I graduated from ECRE, so we have East Coast, Central, and West Coast all represented here. ECRE 40. I graduated last year in July, I believe. But after I graduated, I was a part of the fellowship program, and so I didn't. So I was with that until January of this year, and then I started my role at JPMorgan. And before Codesmith, I was a teacher, just like Kelvin. I taught music middle school, so 6th through 8th, for about half a decade before joining.
Awesome, thank you. Jimmy and I were actually fellows together, so lovely to see you here, Jimmy. Also, Kelvin, I just missed you. I was in C-Tree 15, so. All right, now we're going to sort of get into the meat of the questions, but first let's just talk about what briefly spurred your transitions into software engineering and why you decided to apply to Codesmith in particular. So we'll do Kelvin, and then we'll do Justin, and then we'll do Jimmy.
Yeah, so let's see why I decided to make this pivot anyhow. I think that for me, the pandemic had something to do with it. To have a job that I can do fully remotely, and also, you know, like I like traveling and stuff, so to be able to potentially work from elsewhere too, that was a big part of it. But actually, my best friend growing up went to Codesmith about 2 or 3 years before I did, and he and I are very similar. He went through, he was a fellow as well, but he went through it. He loved it. He started talking to me some more about it. And basically that's, you know, how I at least came to start trying the tutorials and that, found I liked it. And the rest, you know, has led me to where I am now.
I transitioned over to software just because I felt like all of the interesting stuff, like the frontier of technology and stuff, was all in software. So I wanted to go over, and then I applied to Codesmith because it seemed like a really good way to kind of make my coding skills like professional more so, you know, and it worked. So
yeah, I started coding freshman year of college, I was actually a computer science major, but then I switched over to pursue a degree in music because that was my passion at the time. And then around the time when the pandemic hit, I decided to use my free time now to go back to coding and rekindled my love for it. I guess you can say that, romanticize it a bit. And a few years go by, and I decided that this is maybe a career that I actually wanted to pursue, and not just as a hobby. So I just looked at how I can switch careers into tech. Figured out what coding boot camps were, and in my opinion, I thought Codesmith was the best, so I signed up and enrolled in Codesmith.
Amazing. I'm all for romanticizing software engineering. Okay, so this is one of our probably most asked questions right now because the tech space has been quite turbulent recently. So I'm curious to know what your job search experience was like after Codesmith, and how did what you learned in the program actually help you in that job search? So we'll do Justin, Jimmy, and then we'll do Kelvin.
Yeah, so it was difficult. I was working on my code while also applying to jobs, and I just kept getting better as the interviews went on, as they'll tell you, and kept applying, and eventually I found a company that was a really good fit. Honestly, didn't expect to find a company that fit as well as it did, but you just trust the process, and ended up good.
So, the residency is 3 months, but I followed that with fellowship, which essentially you go through the program for another 3 months, but as an instructor. And then after fellowship, there's also this thing called lead fellowship, where you go through the program for a third time, again as an instructor, but more as like a more senior instructor. So I did all of that, as I was essentially a part of Codesmith for 9 months. And towards the end of that, that's when I started applying for jobs. And I was very fortunate enough to land interviews and then essentially sign an offer while I was still a part of Codesmith. So once I finished, I was able to transition into the role that I have now. I understand that not a lot of people would be able to have the same experience as that, because not everyone gets to be a part of the fellowship program and get to do Codesmith for 9 months. But one of the most important things that I learned in all that time is just how to talk about myself and how to talk about technology. Because in the end, you have to kind of get lucky for a job interview. But once you do get that job interview, the ball's in your court. How well can you talk about technology, and how well can you sell yourself to a company? And I think that has been the most important thing that I've learned in my time at Codesmith.
All right, and so for me, let's see, job search experience. So I did an immersive as well, like Jimmy mentioned. It's 3 months. I didn't go into fellowship or anything else, so I basically had the 3 months and then came out. I got the offer for the job that I have now after about 2 months. Let's see. I would say, I mean, all the technical information that I learned at Codesmith obviously has served me a lot. But I think the one thing that would have been the hardest to learn without Codesmith would have been getting the first job, would have been how to interview, strategies for formulating my resume, having sort of a narrative, kind of certain questions about experience or whatever can come up sometimes when you're pivoting from another career like I was. So I feel like that probably was the most invaluable part of it, at least in terms of actually getting the first job. I would say getting a job and actually doing well at a job in this industry are two things that overlap less than you might expect, or less than might be the case for most jobs. But yeah, I would say it was absolutely invaluable. Just the coaching. There's a guy called Eric who comes in toward the end of Codesmith, and yeah, Jimmy's nodding. That guy got me pumped up and gave a lot of good suggestions. And yeah, I would just say, keeping in touch with cohort mates afterward, continuing to work on kind of our narrative and, our spiel that we give in the interviews was great. But then just a lot of things about kind of framing and like Jimmy mentioned too, talking about technology in a way that kind of exudes confidence and competence. And I don't know, just a lot of insight into the industry and the interview process. So I felt like my, hiring process was pretty good and definitely well guided by Codesmith and my cohort mates.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. If anyone here has been to our Monday info sessions, you might have met Eric. He is so wonderful. So if you have the chance, I highly recommend going to one of those. So in your senior portion, each of you worked on an open source product with your fellow cohort mates. So what did you build, and in what ways did that experience prepare you for where you are now?
Yeah, so I did a Scratch OSP. So when you get to the senior portion, you can decide if you want to build an OSP from scratch, or an iteration where you take an OSP that has already been built and you continue to improve upon it. And my team decided we want to build something from scratch. We wanted the experience of coming up with an idea and just making it our own. And I value that experience a lot, just because I had to be creative, and not just me, but the rest of my team too. But we, in the hiring portion, they're coached to tell us that we did all these things. So I say I a lot, but really it is we. We were very creative with the work that we had to do and what we had to design. And having that experience allows me to understand all of the moving parts in my job now. So some people who they don't have experience building a production level code base from scratch or designing it from scratch, they might not understand all the work that goes into it and what's to come after that. So yeah, that's my answer for that.
So the open source project, we did something called ScaleSafe, which is a Kubernetes visualization tool. Kubernetes in general was kind of a common theme for a lot of people's OSPs because it's sort of, I don't know, it's sort of an advanced technology that's kind of hot right now, if you will. But I would say that experience really helped me a lot because it was diving into something that was very unfamiliar to me, like maybe the basic intermediate kind of like front end and back end stuff I was already familiar with. But I mean, you choose a technology that's going to be novel to you essentially when you go into your OSP. And I think that experience of having to sort something out, look at documentation, all that's mixed with trial and error and kind of honing your instinct, those things together, that's a huge part of what getting started in my current role was like. And so just to have already had, obviously it's not exactly the same experience, but to have a similar type of experience, I think made me a lot more comfortable coming into the job that I've got now.
Yeah, also the questions in the chat are great questions. So I don't know, Rachel, should we wait till like the Q&A to like address these?
I was thinking we should wait, but I will leave that up to Caitlin. So
yeah, we can definitely address them at the end in the Q&A. So we can focus on these and we'll keep an eye on that and we'll get back to those. So yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, we see you. Yeah, but for this question, my OSP was Svelte related. So we made a state tracker for Svelte, and that was directly related to my job because ultimately this position that I ended up landing was building out a Svelte kit, like front end basically for the product. And yeah, so it was like directly related for me.
And kind of off the same note, what technical skills and what soft skills do you believe are essential for success in the role that you're in now? and how did Codesmith have an impact on those skills? We'll go Kelvin this time, and then Justin, and then Jimmy.
Yeah, so okay, in terms of technical skills, I mean, I think that's a pretty straightforward answer. Like, you become very familiar, you know, with JavaScript and with Node.js, with React, and those are technologies, you know, that are quite technical to use, especially coming into them when you're not familiar with the syntax of everything. And so you become quite familiar with those. I mean, in terms of technical skills, honestly, I'm not really too sure what to say. I mean, I'm doing kind of more advanced versions of what I did in Codesmith. And so very much using the same muscles, if you will, that I was kind of working out in Codesmith as I was going through. In terms of soft skills, it surprised me because obviously this is a pretty technical career, but I would say that the soft skills have turned out to be even more important than I thought they would be initially. And I would say communication has been huge. Codesmith puts a big emphasis on technical communication. So being able to clearly state what you're doing, talking through algorithms and different coding challenges that you do as you do them, and even kind of a critique of the way that you're making yourself understood as you're doing it. And so I found that in terms of just aligning what I'm doing with the rest of the team has been super helpful. And just, I don't know, kind of being empathetic in general. For me, the company I work at is pretty big. So there are a lot of different teams and a lot of sort of social dynamics to navigate there. So yeah, that's my answer.
Just kind of piggybacking off what you were saying, I definitely think pair programming was super useful, and I still use it because being able to communicate the ideas that you come up with to other people, especially in a startup environment, which is where I am, is totally essential. Because if you're building out something and you can explain it well, that's invaluable and is kind of what separates a Codesmith engineer from just a traditional bootcamp engineer, I would say, probably.
Yeah, I have to, plus one Kelvin, just pretty much everything he said. The stuff that you learn at Codesmith, you're learning it at a very high level. And then now in my job, and I guess in all of our jobs too, we're pretty much doing the same skills, just maybe a little bit more niched or just a little higher level. But you have to have the foundation, the fundamentals of all of the stuff that Codesmith teaches you. The engineering world is very collaborative, especially nowadays with Agile and following Scrum and all of that. So very collaborative. So that means communication is is a priority for software engineers. And not to say it's not a priority for other professions too, but if it is a big priority for software engineers. And Codesmith, that's pretty much the big thing about Codesmith is the communication, technical and also interpersonal. And so Codesmith, with the technical interviews and then all of the pair programming that you do and the code reviews that you do throughout the residency, that just boasts your communication and your technical abilities, in my opinion.
Yes, for those of you who might be preparing for your technical interviews, you probably know that we do place a big emphasis on communication, even from the very first stages, and that is for a good reason. You can be a technician, but you do need that technical communication in order to really be an engineer. So awesome stuff. And I kind of want to dive into now like on the job questions. So can you all share details about the current projects that you're working on and what you're solving, what your role is in those projects, and then what tech frameworks, what languages you're using in those projects? So we'll do Justin, and then we'll do Jimmy, and then we'll do Kelvin. Sure.
So I'm working on the front end and a little bit of the back end for the exchange right now. It's a futures exchange basically, and I'm putting that together. We use SvelteKit, Node.js, a bunch of other tools to make sure that transactions go through and don't conflict with each other, and balances are accounted for.
So my team is currently working on giving some of the JPMorgan Chase public-facing sites a little facelift. We're improving some of those websites. So my team is specifically consumer and community banking. So if you have a bank account with Chase or anything, personal with Chase, not a business, but personal stuff, you'll see some of the work that I've been doing. Right now, working on the front end, and it's really JavaScript and React, and then we're also using the other libraries that are associated with React, like React Router, some React animations, and such like that too. But the main tech that we're using is JavaScript and React.
Yeah, and so the application that I work on is an internal American Express application. It's used by Amex employees to manage the accounts of merchants who use the Amex payment network. So that wouldn't be like I have an Amex card now, obviously, but it wouldn't be like me using my card, but rather companies that want to use the Amex payment network. So for instance, a lot of stores, airlines, things like that, they want to have their own credit cards, but they're not credit card companies. They don't have payment networks. So they'll onboard with a certain company that has a network. And basically the application we work on is how it's what's used for Amex employees to manage those accounts, like with the various merchants. The tech stack is pretty similar to what Jimmy mentioned. I mean, it's React. I'm on a UI team, but it's somewhat of like a full stack role, because we have a node server that we manage also that interacts with like some other servers that are in Java and other languages. So I would say probably like 2/3 of what I do is front end, but there's a little bit of kind of the node stuff that I learned in Codesmith as well. And yeah, also like he mentioned, there are some kind of like proprietary libraries and things like that that you use that are specific to like the company or the project, but that's kind of an overview.
Nice. Okay, well, diving specifically into the fintech side of that, what are the main technical challenges that you all face when developing those financial technologies or just software solutions? Let's do Justin, Jimmy, Kelvin.
Yeah, so I work at a startup, so adapting to new tech is just kind of part of the process. When you're making something brand new, you have the opportunity to look at everything, compare, pick the best product, and move on from there. I'd say choosing that and is like a difficult process, and also throwing away things that don't integrate to your tech stack very well, or at least acknowledging that they don't integrate very well is important. So, yeah.
Yeah, working at such a large company, one of the things that we have to be very aware of is accessibility. How is our websites and our public-facing stuff, how accessible is it? And does it follow, I think the Americans with Disabilities Act, ADA? So we can spend most of our time just tweaking little things on our page to make it completely accessible for everyone who uses our applications.
I would have to say for me, in terms of a biggest technical challenge, I would just say it's the size of the code base. Obviously, as I mentioned, I'm using React, and that's what we learned in Codesmith. But just the fact now it's kind of like a microservice front end. There are all these different repos that kind of interact with each other. So the biggest technical challenge is just keeping that all kind of straight in your head and connecting things across different repos and so many different files. In terms of the biggest challenge in general, though, because that would be the biggest technical challenge, but I would say the biggest challenge in general is working for such a big company and teams are separated out. It's like it's so specialized, I'm on a UI team. There are different backend teams we work with. There's a product team, and there's kind of like the agile people who are sort of their own thing, and all these different entities. They're all sort of separate, and it's not really hierarchical like in last jobs that I've had, where it's kind of like, okay, I've got one boss and I'm really clear on what's happening. So learning how to navigate that, being able to communicate things technically, and even to simplify technical things sometimes into less technical terms for product folks, or situations like that where maybe you don't need to go as much into detail, or you're trying to explain something to somebody who doesn't have as much context on it as you do. I would say it's that, just kind of navigating so many different teams and so many different responsibilities that we all have is what I would say is the biggest challenge.
Nice. Yeah. You know, some of the common themes that I've heard that we deal with at Codesmith, you know, dealing with large code bases, especially if you pick up an OSP that, you know, has a bunch of iterations on it beforehand. Accessibility, that's something that we talk a lot about at Codesmith as well. Migration from new to old tech. All of these things we try to cover in the immersive. So it is really cool to see that you are facing similar technical challenges outside of Codesmith as well. All right, my next question is, what are the most critical factors to consider when designing scalable and reliable fintech platforms? We'll go Justin, Kelvin, Jimmy.
Yeah, so this one relates specifically to fintech very well, and I was saying event management is super important because you're dealing with people's balances, and if you don't make sure that when someone withdraws their money, it gets withdrawn properly, or deposits it gets deposited properly, you could end up stealing $1,000 from somebody on accident or something like that, you know. So I'd say event management, making sure everything happens in succession from the front end all the way through, super important. We use Kafka, but yeah, there's a lot of, it's not just that, like you have to make sure things happen in succession in your repos also. So I'd say events.
I'd say in terms of scalability and just kind of reliability for applications within the context that I'm working, it's largely about modularity. As I mentioned, we have a massive code base, a lot of different repos working together. And so modularity is like, you don't want to be repeating the same code. Like if you have something that needs to be done in different parts of the application, or even just very similar things that maybe aren't exactly the same, you can kind of build out one component that, based on the kinds of arguments you pass into it, can do slightly different things depending on the situation. I would say that's pretty big, because if you're repeating code over and over again, it's like it very quickly becomes unmanageable, especially when you're dealing with so much code in the first place already, as we are. That's probably, I would have to say, the biggest thing. And then also just like, I guess, consistency in general, consistency of styling, consistency of behavior, you know, across different pages and tabs of pages and things like that.
Yeah, again, a +1 for the consistency and also modularity. In my experience, yeah, Chase, one of the things that I'm working on is contributing to their component library, which is, you know, creating, writing code that will be used across the entire code base. So I know JPMorgan has over 6,000 different applications, and all of them have to follow the same branding. And so instead of having to do the branding 6,000 times, you do it once and then just use the same code across all of our applications. And one thing too is that we can make our component library also ADA accessible, which then again saves time for all those other applications, so that they don't have to worry about that for the component that, you know, like that I've written. And then as you continue to scale, and maybe in a decade from now, we have 12,000 applications, all of the work that we've done today can still persist. You don't have to reinvent the wheel every time.
I can't imagine having to rewrite all of that styling every single time for Chase on every page. That would be nightmarish. So yeah, modularity is huge, as well as the security with fintech, really making sure that every interaction that the user takes is exactly what you meant to do. Awesome. So how do you prioritize features and enhancements in your fintech products, considering both the technical feasibility and then also the business impact? We'll do Justin, Jimmy, and then Kelvin.
Yeah, so features, it really depends. I'll just go with an anecdotal example. Last year we had a meeting with the CFTC and we needed to get 2 of our products ready before then. We needed to get our control panel running and we needed to get our exchange front end running and we needed to get the back end running for both products. We finished both of them, but there were bugs, and they were bad, but we needed to prioritize like which bugs are the ones that are going to break like during the presentation and which ones are things that maybe they're features that we don't need right now. So when working at a startup, just that prioritization calculations just always going on in your mind, or with your team. But yeah, at the end of the day, you just collaborate and figure it out. Yeah.
So we are working at a fintech company. And this is again my personal experience. Even though it has tech in the description of the company, it's at the end of the day, JPMorgan is a bank, and that's the services that they provide to the customer is banking services, investing, all the other money stuff that you can think of. And our role as software engineers is to help the bank do its job. And so we're building a website, we're building an application so that the bank can, sell you a credit card or sell you a car loan or something like that. And so there's two powers at play. There are the designers, the stakeholders who want a product and they want it now. And then on the other end, there's the technical folks who say like, can't get that done that fast. And, we really need to be focusing our efforts on something else like a component library. And so there's deadlines from both ends and they often conflict. What my team has done and what I have done is just put out the larger fire first. So whoever is screaming louder, go help them out first, and then figure it out as you go.
Oh, and that's funny. Yeah, I feel like just to really quickly address something that Jimmy said, I feel like working at a company like of this size level, like he and I both work in, yeah, there's a fair amount of firefighting like at any given time. Just like you gotta, address so many things. But anyhow, so the question was, I'm sorry, technical and business impact, right?
Yeah, so how do you prioritize?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for technical feasibility, I think that's again where communication comes in, talking to like the senior engineer, talking to other teams, getting an idea kind of on maybe how they are going about their end, of what our code's going to be interacting with for what they've done, or talking to people who've done it before. In terms of the business impact, that's pretty much separated out into like the product team making those types of decisions. So I can't really speak to that one. But on the technical side, I would just say, again, the communication, being able to ask good questions and having the confidence to do that.
Absolutely. And I think putting out fires is probably a common theme across not just fintech jobs, not just software engineering jobs, but maybe any job. So, all right, we're gonna go on to one of my last questions in this sort of, on the job category, but how do you foster innovation and creativity within your engineering teams while you maintain that focus on reliability and stability in fintech solutions? Let's do Kelvin, Justin, Jimmy.
Sure. So this is actually something that it's pretty cool. It's built into the way that our team works. So we work in sprints, which are 2 weeks long, where typically you're assigned a certain amount of tasks that you need to complete within the 2 weeks. Agile, like workflow. But every fifth sprint is something called an innovation sprint, where if there's any pending work that needs to be done, like we'll finish it up at that time. But typically that time set aside for us to try to find some way of saving effort, saving, labor hours and things like that. So it's been really cool. It's been a big opportunity to explore a little bit outside of just really specifically what I've been working on. And so exploring like scripting, things like that, ways to just automate small things that we have to do, like for new people who onboard, there'll be certain things that all of them have to do. So if we can write a script to automate that's something that I've kind of worked on a little bit. And it's been really nice because I feel like that's one of the biggest things. Once I already got the ropes a little bit of the job responsibilities, like as such, that space for innovation has been huge in terms of continuing to grow and sort of expand. I guess just my experience, my capabilities.
I'm next, right? For this. Okay. So, I think that like trust is super important when fostering creativity, or at least I can only really speak to a smaller environment. My company's maybe 8 to 10 people. So there aren't many of us. So if one person isn't doing their job, isn't being creative, or isn't capable of like being creative in a high pressure, high stress environment, it wouldn't really work out well. So you need to kind of have that trust in the people around you that, okay, they're going to do the right thing. And then also provide them with the autonomy necessary to foster that creativity, use it to come up with solutions, because in order to be creative, you need a little bit of space to do that, I think. But also, yeah, I don't know. I think once the company gets bigger, my opinions on this is going to change and the workflow is going to be different. But for now, everyone's a rock star, everyone's doing their thing. And I think that's important in a startup environment.
Yeah, my current team is actually quite nice. It's a wide variety and diversity of people from experience, ages, culture, all of that. And one of the things that we've been doing is encouraging people to make pull requests early and often. A pull request is, for those of you who don't know, is you submitting your work to be reviewed. And once you get a review, it can either be approved or get sent back to you to, fix something, and then you submit another pull request. And so we're encouraged to make PRs quite often so that folks can give you the reviews that you need to improve as you're going. And often when you're doing these frequent PRs, you'll find a solution that you might not have thought of because you didn't get the feedback while you were still kind of like figuring out the solution to your problem, if that makes sense. So having just consistent feedback all the time has allowed me to be a bit more creative in my work, and likewise with my colleagues too.
Nice. I've been on the receiving end of a few not rejected PRs, but maybe go back and look at another solution, sort of code review for one of my PRs here at Codesmith. So definitely a common practice, and cool to see that you're continuing that. And Justin, yeah, I can see how that innovation is absolutely key when you're working at a startup with such a small team. It's got to be creative at all times to really get that off the ground. So it's cool to hear your perspective from being with a startup. And now I sort of want to talk about looking ahead, potentially into the future of fintech or just your own future. So how do you all continue to develop and enhance your skills in sort of this, evolving field? And how do you stay updated on the latest trends, on the latest technologies in this industry? We'll do, Justin, Kelvin, Jimmy.
Sure. So yeah, I'm kind of in a position where I'm learning whether I want to or not, so my skills are just being enhanced by the nature of like I'm building a new product, not a super long answer to that for me, I feel like.
I would have to kind of piggyback off what Justin said too. I feel like a good portion of what I get assigned to do are things that I'm already familiar with because of Codesmith, but there are like, I don't know, just other things come up, and working on things that are specific to this industry has been pretty interesting. I mean, definitely, like I mentioned, writing scripts to automate things. That's something that I think is really cool. So I'm thinking about, at some point learning some other languages that would kind of be more powerful towards writing scripts. But yeah, at this point, I feel like I'm still, kind of like solidifying my understanding, especially of working within this context, I would say.
Yeah, with this field, one of the things that drew me to it was how you always have to be on your toes, learning new things. And one of the reasons why I wanted to work at JPMorgan was because it's such a large company and there's lots of professional development that's offered. They actually have their own coding boot camp for employees, and not just any employees, but like also software engineers too. Like right now, there's a cloud computing thing that they're doing. So yeah, that is the thing that just really interests me. And finding a company that provides that level of professional development was important for me, and that's why I was there. Does that answer the question?
Absolutely. That sounds so cool, by the way, that they're doing their own little cloud boot camp at your company. So this is, something that's sort of personal, so feel free to answer it however you'd like. But I'm curious to know what future career moves that you all are hoping to make, whether that's maybe, moving into management, whether it's staying at your company, specializing in a certain area, if you're looking into other industries besides fintech, if you're looking into other companies in terms of size, whatever that means for you. I'd love to hear what you're thinking about your next steps. So we'll do Kelvin, Jimmy, Justin.
I'm actually glad that this question kind of gives me an opportunity to like dovetail a little bit off of what Jimmy said on the last one, because there is similar like learning opportunities on the job in the role that I'm at. So I was hired on a contract, and it's like a year, contract to hire kind of thing. And like I would say my immediate goal is to get hired on as a colleague. Although there are a lot of people who have been contractors for like a long period of time. But anyhow, when you become a colleague, yeah, you're able to take like a dedicated amount of time every year to just learning and professional development. I know that if I stay in the current role that I'm in, I would have the opportunity at some point to learn Java, which would be pretty cool. Be able to kind of make a little bit more of a foray into back-end engineering. I'd like that a lot. I would say at least for the medium term, I'm planning on staying in the job that I'm in now. Again, I moved to Phoenix for this, and I like Phoenix more than I thought I would even. Like, not that I wasn't expecting to like it, but it's just, I don't know, I'm quite happy in this job and where I am now. So, unless something else comes along or something changes, I think I'll just kind of continue on this nice track that I've been able to get on.
Yeah, so the buzzword nowadays is machine learning and artificial intelligence. And yeah, I'm gonna hop on that train too, because I find it real cool, real interesting. Especially when you graduate, there's this machine learning module that you get to be a part of if you like. And yeah, I did that, and that almost like made me want to like, do I want to continue with like software engineering, or do I want to pivot over and do something machine learning? So that's the thing that I might want to play with, in the coming years.
Cool. Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that, I got into software engineering because and I mentioned this earlier, because I want to be on the forefront of things, I feel like. So my goal going forward is to continue learning so that I can be on that forefront. And whether that ends up being me continuing to be a software engineer, or like having my own company or starting something with somebody else, like that's kind of I'm learning as much as I can because I just got into the field, still young in my software engineering career. So just keep learning. That's what I'm thinking right now.
Amazing. Well, I am so looking forward to seeing where you all end up in, the next few years. And machine learning, I know that we dip our toes into it here at Codesmith in terms of a few units, but we don't have a full program right now. It is something that I know a lot of people are interested in, and we do encourage sort of using OpenAI in your projects when you do come to Codesmith. So it is something that, we're always looking at. We're always looking at for what the new tech is, what the new thing is. So thank you all. And we are going to jump into the questions from our lovely audience. So if you have a question, we'd love to hear it. I'm going to take one from the chat first that I saw earlier. So let's see. I believe it was Shannon. How are you all getting interviews with only bootcamp experience? I think this is an awesome opportunity for you all to sort of talk about how Codesmith sort of guides you in applying, and how we teach you how to present yourself in an interview, and looking back at the applications that you had, looking back at the experiences that you had job searching. What were the things that really got you into those rooms? Let's do Jimmy, and then we'll do Justin, and then Kelvin.
Yeah, I'm still thinking a bit about how I want to say this. In the software engineering world, you provide your worth by how well you can code. That is the advice that was given to us by Eric. I think we talked about Eric a bit, and that is true. There's a person who works on my floor, not on my team, but on my floor, and they're 20 years old, graduated high school, and have been working for Chase since they were like 17. And that person is a nerd and can code like no one else. And that's why they're there, and with Codesmith, they give you the experience and to build your skills. And then also the hiring program to teach you to talk about your skills too. So that's my take on that on that question, Shannon.
Was it me next or Kelvin?
I think you.
Okay. I'd say finding someone who's like nice enough to be mean to you is pretty important, like about your resume, about whatever it is that you have. If you're lucky enough to get an interview, record it so you can see how like embarrassing like the experience was, and you can learn from it. And you don't just like dismiss it in the past. Like it's very important to like, I've saved every resume I've made. I have maybe like 15 resumes. And looking back, you can kind of see the progress and like see what you learn like as you go. So I think it's just super important and I had like I don't know if I said this already. I had like 8 mentors that I reached out to kind of give me that advice. Just random people from like someone I knew who's like a software engineer from college, or like reached out to on LinkedIn, or family or something like that. So finding those people and getting them to criticize you, super helpful. Criticize your resume, get you to be better. That's it. Yeah.
So when I was interviewing, it was about a year ago now, or I guess more like 11 months, almost a year ago. And I remember the market was pretty rough then. I haven't been keeping up with it too much, but my understanding is that it's kind of similar now, still. And I would say definitely there's a huge aspect to what sort of Justin mentioned. You've got to be applying you know, multiple hours a day, like almost every day. You basically got to make a full-time job once you graduate out of applying. But with that said, I mean, in terms of getting the interviews, right? I think that was the question specifically, was like getting the interview, right? Definitely there's a numbers game aspect to it, but there's something that Codesmith teaches you called a Codesmith style application, right? And I remember it's kind of time consuming, right? There are a lot of different sort of steps to it. And I mean, it can even be a little bit different depending on which company you're applying to. And, you know, you'll have, like, I've got many different versions of my resume as well, as Justin mentioned. So sort of customizing or, you know, modifying the way that you go about it, depending on each opportunity, and Codesmith allows you to be able to kind of hone in your approach for different companies. I remember there was a period where, because there obviously is a numbers game aspect to it, I actually was like, okay, well, I can't, you know, I don't know, I didn't feel like spending half an hour or 40 minutes doing Codesmith style applications all the time was going to serve me. I figured, all right, well, maybe those applications, if I do quick applies, things like that, maybe each individual application would have less of a chance of getting me an interview, but I'm getting much more volume of applications out. I'd probably get more. That turned out not to be the case at all. The only interviews I got were based off of Codesmith style applications, even though I sent out far more applications that were just kind of quick applies, just sending a kind of like a generic resume, that kind of thing. So I would say it's about your resume, and it's about kind of that whole process of not only sending the resume, but also kind of the other ways to try to find something that sets you apart for any given role that you'd be applying to. That's what I would say.
Yeah, super helpful. I totally agree with everything that you all said, especially with the one Codesmith style applications, but also with multiple iterations of your resume, with really figuring out what works and what doesn't work. And we do have like post Codesmith hiring resources as well. I've utilized them multiple times. We have hiring engineers that will sit down with you and give you honest feedback, because if there's one thing that interviewers probably are not going to do, if they don't want to hire you, they're probably not going to give you honest feedback. And if they do, then you should absolutely take that and run with it. But most of the time they'll just give you a, oh, sorry, we decided to go with the other applicant. But anyway, I will pass it off to Colin. Do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's twofold. I'm wondering what your criteria was for getting hired. Like, what were you kind of looking at? And then how did you suss out, how did you tell if the companies really were what you were looking for? Because it's kind of abstract to me, especially these big companies, to figure out, well, what are they really like? Like some people want to make a lot of money, some people want to work with cool people. Like, how do you tell what it's actually like? And thanks so much. This is super helpful for us because it's abstract. And so this is like our gateway into what it's really like. So thanks.
Yeah, I'll let you all sort of speak up when, if you have an answer to that.
Yeah, mine's pretty easy, honestly. I applied directly on Y Combinator because I knew I liked the startup stuff, and I wanted to be really involved. So I went on Y Combinator. You could apply to like 10 companies a day or something, and I was doing that. And I specifically like finance, so I would prioritize those applications if they were available. That's where I ended up landing. So there was Eric, the Codesmith Eric, he recommends this site with a bunch of people who just recently got funding also. I forget what that is. Do any of you remember? Anyways, shouldn't be too hard to like find most recent funding on Google. Those companies are oftentimes hiring and are useful to reach out. I have the startup lens to this, but yeah.
On the, I guess, other end of the spectrum, with working on a larger company, is you might be, like, I personally interviewed for my team. So like I met my team and my manager before I even got the job. Those were the people that interviewed me. But my colleagues and maybe other companies, that's not the case. You actually interview for the company and then you get the job offer. And then you kind of go on like a speed date with all these other teams. And then you end up, picking a team that you want to join. So you can first decide on, what kind of company that you want to work for, what industry do you want to work for. Generally in fintech or banking, I know all the large banks do hybrid work or hybrid models. So if you really want to work remote and fully remote, then probably banking isn't the industry for you, right? But once you say you get the job, then you can really get fine-grained into like the kind of people that you want to work with, and that's where you go to on these. I call it speed dating. There's an official term for it that I don't really know, but yeah, you interview. Like you spend like a whole day, and you get paid to spend the whole day just interviewing different teams. Like 30-minute speed dates. To see like the culture of the team, meet all the folks in the team. And then at the end, they'll say, yes or no to you, and then you also say yes or no to them. I also, my personal decisions for coming into this industry was also the same as to why I wanted to go to JPMorgan, is the continuous learning and the opportunity to do so. And I felt that this company could provide that.
For me, in terms of criteria, to be honest, I didn't have a lot of criteria. I knew that I felt more comfortable with front end, so I sort of sought out UI roles, which is what I've landed. But I mean, it's possible that Justin and Jimmy take like really, really good care of their skin or something, but I feel pretty safe in my assumption that I'm like significantly older than both of them. So that for me, coming out of the boot camp, I kind of wanted to just get a job as quickly as possible. And I feel, like I was well prepared to do that. And I kind of was a bit fortunate in doing that too. So I really applied to anything that even seemed remotely close to what I'd be interested in. I figured, I would just come into the industry, cut my teeth a bit. And if I didn't like where I ended up, well, then I could always, in a year or whatever, apply to a different role. But again, I feel pretty fortunate. I'm quite happy where I am now. But yeah, not a huge kind of selective mechanism for me. I just kind of like applied a lot and was going to take almost whatever I was able to get first, and got lucky to get something that I quite like.
Nice. Thank you for that question, Colin. And I did not know that about the like team speed dating, Jimmy. That's really cool. So, okay. Well, I will go ahead and close us out. And thank you so much, Kelvin. Thank you, Jimmy. Thank you, Justin, for joining us tonight.